Hi, I'm Maya Silverberg. I'm a Hungarian-American artist, originally from New York, and I currently live in London, and we're in my London-based studio in Euston. I'm gonna show you guys around my new studio, which I recently moved into, and talk a bit about my practice. I recently graduated from the Slade School of Fine Art, where I did my master's in fine art. And before that, I studied at Columbia University in New York, where I received my BA in art history. After graduating from my BA, I moved to Brussels, where I trained as a traditional trompe-l'oeil decorative painter. And I undertook a really intensive 6-month, what they would call a formation, which is like a technical training. And I think my work as a whole is in response to that experience, thinking about the world of craft and how it relates to the fine arts, and specifically centered around decoration and what it means for something to be decorative, ornamental, but as played out, through craft and through material. It's not fine art and it's not art at all. It was entering into it was like learning how to be a plumber, except that you were using paint. And they had, a completely unique visual economy, way of techniques, materials, and hierarchy of visual values. And I undertook that training as an artist. I was interested in both in sort of assimilating and stealing those techniques to use in my own practice. But more than that, I was interested in that experience of entering into a totally different way of engaging with material, into a non-artistic paradigm. And my work thinks about what are the aesthetic implications of different processes. And that's played out since starting at Slade. I've started working in a much more kind of multimedia and expanded context. So previously I was only producing paintings, like more traditional oil paintings. But I, since doing my master's, have started to produce a lot of large scale wooden sculptures made with plywood, which is, a sort of construction. It's an incredibly cheap industrial and vernacular material that's used in carpentry. So I've been working a lot also with printmaking, and with a lot of offcuts, both kind of found objects and also appropriated industrial objects. So behind me, I have about 100 kilos of leather offcuts from the saddlery industry. So these are pieces that are left over from the process of producing horses' saddles. So I recently had my first solo show at Doxa Budapest, and the show was called Horseshoe Theory, and it was centered around a wooden sculpture that I'd made out of plywood, which is kind of almost in the shape of a horseshoe, but coming out of the wall. And on each end of the sculpture, I'd made handmade marquetries, which is like when you cut wooden veneer into images. It's a really old craft tradition. So horseshoe theory is the name of a political science term. It's a theory in political science that says the extreme right and the extreme left might be more related to each other than they are to the center. And so with this sculpture, I wanted to literalize that metaphor by saying, well, what if it's literally, it is a political science metaphor that relies on the shape of an object. So with the project of Horseshoe Theory, the show, I wanted to take that a step further and sort of heighten the absurdity and say, well, what if it was actually about horses? Which, it's a metaphor. But in the Hungarian context, I thought that it would be extremely funny to actually make this show be about horses, because horses are such an overdetermined symbol in the Hungarian mythology. So I included these leather offcuts from the saddlery industry in the show, um, which, you know, they're objects that I'm not interested in. That I am actually not at all interested in horses. But I love these objects because the compositions are completely economically dictated. So the leather craftsman cuts as much as he can out of the material, uh, and then, you know, and then the material is exhausted, and then they have these pieces which are basically waste materials, but they don't want to throw them out because potentially they have some sort of you know, they still have some sort of value. Potentially, there could be a tiny piece cut out of it or something like that. The offcut is really interesting because it's the absolute inverse of what the industry needs. I mean, they needed this, and now what I have is the remainder. At Doxa, I made an installation with some of these pieces, and then I exhibited a large format photograph that I had taken of the sculpture I produced, Horseshoe Theory. And I thought that it was nailed to the wall with actual horseshoe nails. I also have a photography practice, so my work is really quite multimedia across sculpture, printmaking, painting, and photography. And actually, photography is very central to my conceptual process. It's really kind of the backbone, I would say, of my painting and printmaking, where I maintain a photography practice, and will use the images I take, which are mostly of I would say found compositions, streetscapes, and museum displays. But yeah, I had a large. We printed the photograph to the exact size of the sculpture, um, and I thought it was quite funny to to play with that kind of mediation and not show the real thing. So that was installed, and we had these leather objects and played the sound of horses walking on a cobblestone street. My favorite moment is when I'm physically working, and a lot of my processes are quite physically demanding. Like I have a sculpture on view at the Courtauld Institute right now, and it's a wooden sculpture that I decorated with about 5,000 nails, and that meant that I hammered it with the nail, you know, and that was like painful, dissociatively boring, but also extremely important conceptually and aesthetically, because each place where I put the nail was a time when I was making a decision about the final end aesthetic product of the piece. And, you know, in lots of ways, that sculpture was asking the question of whether a hammer and nail could be an aesthetic process, which, by the way, it is. There's a rich European tradition. There's like a medieval artistic tradition of making compositions using nails. So it was very important for me that I personally did all of that work. And it's kind of my favorite moments in the studio is when I'm, you know, physically exhausted and doing an incredibly demanding process. I mean, I make photographs and I take lots of notes. And if I have drawings, it's like a technical design, you know, for a sculpture that needs a shape. But these are some drawings when I was figuring out, these were for Horseshoe Theory. So this is like the shape of the sculpture when I was trying to decide on its proportions. But yeah, my sketchbook really, you'll see, is just a lot of notes. And that's what's helpful for me. Lately, a lot of my work doesn't have any painting in it. It's totally sculptural, but I still very much identify as a painter, and I think painterly logics are fundamental to my move in terms of I'm thinking about surface and patina and yeah, a certain type of spatial composition, even when I'm working in installation or in sculpture. And I think a lot of my sculptural works, even though you know, they deal with volume, they're very imagistic, and they all come from drawings and almost like quite hallucinatory compositions in the way that a painter might develop a painting of like there needs to be this kind of massive image. So my, my painting cart, my palette, and my brushes, like, it's quite funny. I want to be around them, even if I'm not making paintings at all. They feel very relevant, and they're objects that I like care for massively. You really kind of invest in caring for an object. So this is like this is a vignette, which is like a traditional decorative painting brush for painting wood grain. And this is a blaireau, which is from badger fur, and it's for softening. So there's these like quite technical brushes that I have these long relationships with. I'm looking forward to quite a few upcoming shows. I'll be in a few group shows, including 2 duo shows in London this coming year, and I have an upcoming solo show in Europe, which I can't say more at this moment. And I'll be in New Contemporaries, which is extremely exciting. And yeah, it's a huge honor, I think, especially as a relatively recent immigrant. It feels very cool to be included in like such a kind of British institution. And that's really exciting. And I'm also going to be in a group show in Shanghai this spring. So it's going to be a fun and busy year.